the next major change we had in the study of management really came with what we call the human relations management. It is a huge point, a turning point, so to speak, in management, because we shifted over from having this very linear aspect, this mechanistic thing of this is the work you're supposed to do this over here, and then you do this, and then you do this. You went from this highly mechanistic approach to management where workers were just pawns to be shifted around for the productivity into actually considering that workers were something more than a machine. So from a behavioral viewpoint, there's three different stages: the early behavioralism, the actual beginning of the movement, and then it evolved into what we call today the behavioral science. Really, it was initially pioneered by a guy named Munsterberg, who was well, we call him actually the father of industrial psychology, which is part of my field that I'm in. So that being said, he contributed three ways. They studied the jobs, they determined which people are best suited to the jobs. They defined the jobs with a job description, and of course you probably heard of those, okay? And then they identified the psychological conditions as to when employees do their best work and to devise strategies to make that happen. Well, then you had Mary Parker Follett. She is probably one of the key people to take that philosophy and start implementing it into the real world. She really focused in on civics and sociology, but she thought that the organizations themselves, the workplace, should become more democratic, with managers and employees working cooperatively instead of this top-down only as it is. The people could actually talk to the managers. It was a new concept. Actually, it was a new concept. So the idea was to make them more democratic, and it really proved itself over here by a gentleman who accidentally stumbled on what we call the Hawthorne effect. Now, frankly, I think this is probably one of the most interesting studies in management. Mayo led a Harvard research group to conduct productivity studies at several of Western Electric plants. One of them was called Hawthorne in Chicago in the late 1920s. Well, in essence, what he was using, he was applying the scientific method to try to improve the overall productivity. So they ended up going into the plants and they studied the lighting. So all of a sudden the workers are working, they're winding wire coils for telephones. And so in the process of winding them, all of a sudden, one day, a bunch of people show up. They have suits and ties on. They have clipboards. They're studying them. And they have workers on ladders changing the light bulbs. Well, they changed all the light bulbs from one wattage into something a little bit brighter. So the workers are watching all this happening, and their productivity kicked up. Well, obviously, it really dealt with the increased lighting. Well, then they sat there in the elevator again. They came in later, put some brighter lights in, and productivity went up again. Well, it's obvious that brighter lighting meant better productivity, so they raised it again. Well, they kept on raising it to the point that it became dangerous to work. You needed to come to work with a pair of sunglasses. So then they thought, well, let's change it again. So boom, they changed it. They went back down to the original lighting level, and productivity didn't go down. It went up again. Well, then they changed it, they lowered it again, and it went up again. So when the light goes up, productivity goes up. When the light goes down, productivity goes up. And by the time they were all done, they were very frustrated. And out of the 7 plants, they pulled out of 5 plants. They says, this study is just junk. Mayo kept it up, and he focused in on finally the Hawthorne plant all by itself. And what they found out is when you talk to people, they like it. And it means something to them. When the boss says, hey, how can you do this job better? All of a sudden, these people who might have been put on a shelf because of the fact that they're just workers, they're being listened to, and the productivity picked up. People like to be talked to. If you have an upper level executive position, plop yourself down next to a low level worker and say, yo, how's it going? And they will tell you, and it's incredible, the things that you can learn by listening to people at the lowest level by paying attention to them. Workers don't mind a boss watching over them, but they do mind when the boss doesn't listen. If the boss watches over them and they have a chance for feedback, all of a sudden that changes the whole world. And this really is the true birth of this whole aspect of the human relations movement. Well, then you had a guy named Abraham Maslow, and quite frankly, this is probably one of the most practiced areas of really social research about human behavior. We call it the Maslow hierarchy of needs. He really focused in on patients, and he looked in the aspect that he believed that motivations arise from different needs that we have. And a need is an unmet aspect of what we have, and he defined it with 5 different levels. Here's a picture of this. You're going to see it here. You're probably also going to see Maslow's hierarchy of needs in your psychology classes, in your psychology studies. This is relevant, and we all go through it. First of all, you have at the very base level, your physiological needs. Those are your basic life needs that you have. Water, food. You really focus in on the super basic elements, and really, if you don't have those met, you're not going to be searching for any other needs. You just have to search for your basic sustenance and water just to get by. Then from that point, once that's satisfied on a regular basis, you feel safer. Then you start looking for some place for shelter to put a roof over your head to get life more comfortable. And then once you reach that level, then you go on and say, okay, well, I've got a place to live now, and you have some type of safety, some kind of housing safety, some food safety. So then you look on the aspect of being part of a group, is social needs. And then eventually, once you have that filled, then you go all the way up to esteem needs and so on. As you go up the different levels of needs, your book will cover a lot more of this in specific detail, but almost any book, just look up Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you'll be able to get a good gist of it. By the time you're done, some of us can actually reach the higher levels, including that thing called self-actualization. Now, I disagree with Maslow, and heaven forbid that should happen, because most psychology professors would roll their eyes as soon as I say that. We all have the opportunity to look on the self-actualization when you have something that is so deeply meaningful to you that it stays with you your entire life. You know what? It could be something as simple as one music piece that you truly love, and every time you hear of it, it takes you back. It transcends your current level as to where you're at, and you have that. Or a piece of art, or a moment somebody said something to you, or whatever that may be. We all have those little moments when we can sit down there and perceive the world in a different state, and it brings true joy to our inner being. That's called self-actualization. Well, the only problem is that whenever you have something come in, the boss says, if you don't do this, I'm going to fire you. Our jaw drops. We're panicking because all of a sudden now we need to keep our job, because if we don't have our job, all of a sudden there goes our esteem, there goes our social, there goes our house, we're going to go out the street. That's a real scenario in a lot of the world, sometimes even here in the United States. So all of a sudden now we start looking at our needs, and you have to have all the needs fulfilled to move up. But you can have them all cascade and disintegrate in a short period of time. So Douglas McGregor came up, and to some extent it looks a little bit similar to this aspect over here of the Maslow hierarchy of needs. He came up with this thing called the theory X and theory Y. He simplified a lot of this, but pay attention to this, because this is a big deal. You will have a theory X manager sometime in your career, and you will have a theory Y manager as well in your career. And we'll talk about this specifically. If you recall, I mentioned before about the Department of Labor, where it says that the average millennial and the average, really the Gen Z, will have up to 20 plus different jobs between the age of 20 and 40. Well, that being said, that's an awful lot of jobs. Somewhere in there, you're going to have one of these people. Well, the Theory X people, they think that workers don't like to work, and they seek to avoid it. They got to be forced, controlled, and directed. And therefore, if they don't do it, we're going to punish them. Yes, yes, yes. Well, it won't be quite that bad, and they'll never say that out loud, but they might be thinking it. They view that the primary motivators for workers are fear and punishment. The Theory Y people are really different. Here's a Theory X person, and to be straight with you, there's a lot of really good bosses, of really good leaders that are theory X. They're linear, they're pathway. You need to do this for success, this for success, this for success. And it's not a bad thing. It's just who they are and it's how they operate. And really, a lot of times, it can be very successful. You also have the theory Y person, which is people like to work. It's part of life. I'm going to help them seek their goals in their own livelihood. And most people seek responsibility. I'm going to give it to them. I want to sit down there and have their intellectual properties really realized in their workplace so they can thrive here. Two different schools of thought. Completely, you'll have both of them in your career. A lot of times in this, on the 3 steps of empowerment, you'll find out what people think the problems in the organization are, let them design solutions, and then get out of the way. You'll see a lot of theory Y leadership taking place on the jobs that are very organic, where people have to have a high level of creativity versus the kind of job where they're mechanistic. Take the hamburger, flip over the hamburger after 3 minutes, then put it into a bun, and that's a mechanistic job. Here, create a code to sit down there and do the following, and the boss walks away. You'll see the 2 different philosophies right there. Know the Hawthorne study. If you have an opportunity, feel free to go on into the web and check it out. There's a couple of original, actually, pictures of the study. It really is fascinating. Maslow's hierarchy, know what it is in case it's on the test. But the reality is it's on the test daily. It's part of our natural born life, and also McGregor's theory X and Y. You will see that in action in the workplace on a regular basis. Know all 3 of these. It'll really help you career-wise as well. So this class. Take care.